The following video is kindly sponsored by Squarespace. Stick around at the end for more information. Hey everybody, I'm Daniel from Spacedock, and this, I'm sure you'll recognise, is the space battle from the end of Serenity, the excellent movie conclusion to Joss Whedon's Firefly. And since this gorgeous battle goes by really quite quickly and centres largely on Serenity itself, I thought I'd take the opportunity to track through it slowly and point out some of the awesome little designs that are buried in this battle that have never quite got the attention they deserve. So just to start out here, we begin with Serenity disguised as a Reaver ship in the middle of this cluster of other Reaver ships near Miranda. This is totally new designs around here, all new ships. This kind of creepy crab-looking thing that's hovering near Serenity is very interesting. But if we look closely in the background there, behind the pincered crab ship is the old Todd Boyce Defender from Battlestar Galactica, which often finds its way into other properties as a recycled 3D model. For the full story of that strange little anomalous ship, you can check my video, The Battlestar Galactica Ship You've Never Heard Of. But here it's been sadly revered up, and it's there hanging out in the background. It gets a little bit more prominently shown off later in this battle. We have a nice bit here where we get Firefly's classic muffled space sounds with the gunfire. The kind of sounds you'd get as the gunfire resonated through the hull as heard from the inside, which is about as realistic as you can get while still having some drama. As we cut over to the Alliance ships waiting for the Serenity to arrive, we first get a look at this thing. The RPG sourcebook for Firefly calls this a Victoria-class corvette, which is a good name. It's a cool-looking ship. The book also suggests that the flagship of the Union of Allied Planets is the prototype of this class, called the Victoria. Having the flagship of the Alliance be a corvette is kind of embarrassing. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case, if it is true, but either way, this is a cool little design. If we look quickly behind it here, we have one of these nice ships with a kind of ring-shaped section amidships. You'll see more of that later on. And these little gunboats with their folded wings, which we see more of in a second. As we track back, we get some larger and larger Alliance ships. There really is a nice variety of designs here, and they're all very cool. These kind of bulky frigates in the centre are my least favourite, but they're certainly not bad. This large battleship, or whatever it is, in the centre is a very, very cool design, very sleek. I like these large missile pods on the sides. It's an awesome sloping shape. And my favourite of the whole lot is these, which I believe the RPG sourcebook calls Longbow-class destroyers. We'll get a better look at those throughout this video, and they really are cool little designs. Appropriate name, too, as these sort of engine struts here look like longbows. Okay, and now we're at the classic scene where Serenity leads the Reaver fleet to ambush the Alliance. If we check out this awesome sequence here of the Corvette extending all of its little weapons hardpoints, we get some really nice looks at the windows on the side of the ship. You can actually see the operative and his various bridge officers behind the main bridge window here. All these large missile pods extending is very cool. Another awesome point is that we see these little gunboats sort of extend their wings and go into a kind of attack formation as they move away from the Corvette. Really cool little motion. Okay, and now the Reaver fleet appears. A lot of these are just like a giant mess of nonsense, as is appropriate for the Reavers. But first thing that needs to be pointed out is this ship here in the bottom left with the sloped hull and the pod on the port side is the same ship that chases the Serenity in the first episode of the show, Serenity. Either this is a similar class of civilian ship that was also converted by the Reavers, or this is literally the same ship. As I recall, that Reaver ship in the first episode didn't get destroyed or anything, it just kind of got knocked aside by Serenity's engine burn at the end of the episode. So it may well have survived long enough to return in this little fleet here, which is a cool little detail. As we see this awesome widening shot of the Reaver fleet landing upon the Alliance, we can see a couple of ships in the Reaver fleet are the same class of longbow destroyers I mentioned earlier on the Alliance's side. They've just been reavered up, which makes a lot of sense. It probably saved money on the VFX budget, but it's also something that would undoubtedly happen in universe. There are bound to have been Alliance warships that have been captured by the Reavers from time to time, so it's pretty cool that we see a few of them here. From this bridge window viewpoint, we can see a couple of them. There's one of those longbow destroyers on the right and another on the left. Really, really cool designs. I really appreciate how this battle is very, very clear and well lit. There's no murky lighting or anything. You can see everything, and you can watch it a bunch of times and see cool little parts of it that you didn't see before on each run-through. On this shot, we get a good look at the ships with the kind of ring section in the middle, some kind of frigates. They're cool little designs. I like these sort of rapid-fire blue particle effects, and we get a few strike craft and bombers kicking about. We don't really get a close enough look at any of them, but they are all there. A couple of them look kind of like short swords from Halo. Coming in now, we get a lot of broadside shots of the large destroyers, the longbows, all looking very cool. There's a nice beauty shot here. There's some kind of very sleek-looking Alliance fighter on the left of Serenity here, and there's these big brick-shaped frigates. These are my least favourite designs, but we do get a nice long shot of it dropping loads and loads of fire ahead of it here. Now, if we look very closely here, this is the first of a few moments in which we get to see these destroyers firing their giant tank cannons that they have on the top. This is a really cool destroyer design to me because it looks like a glass cannon. It has a giant weapon, but it also looks kind of thin and weak. Looks like it needs escort from other ships. And it also has these racks along the ventral hull, which I assume are embarked fighters or drones or something to that effect. I'd love to speak to the guy who designed all of these things, because there's definitely a consistent logic going on here for the Alliance fleet. It's a shame we only really saw these things in this one battle. Here we can see the aft engine section of one of those longbow destroyers, along with a lot of little bombers and fighters flying alongside. Also these kind of long, narrow things in the center here. I'm not sure what these are, perhaps some kind of interceptors. Here's a classic Firefly moment as we see two ships actually lassoing each other. Very appropriate. And also, if you look closely here, this destroyer is engaged in a broadside fight with a ship of its own class in use by the Reavers. See, if this was just a VFX money-saving effort, they would probably try and push the Reaver ships to the back of the shots to make sure that nothing like this was ever in close focus. But since they took the time to actually draw attention to this here, I think they're very much showing off that they've thought about the fact that the Reavers would indeed capture Alliance ships. This cool mirroring moment is a very nice bit of ambient world building here. Okay, towards the end here we get this nice vertical flyby section where we get a very close look at one of the destroyers as it drops a round into some other ship that's partially obscured. We get a really good look at its cannon firing. You can actually see here that the big cannon on the top is twin-barreled, if you look very closely. This is pretty much the only moment you can see that. And looking even more closely here, you can see that those racks on the underside really do seem to be fighter berths. These look like wings on these small sections here, so I would assume this is indeed some kind of light carrier-destroyer hybrid. This is a really cool design. I know I've said that already, but this is really my favourite thing here. Would like to see this more in some kind of publication in the future if this franchise is ever salvaged in any way. And just here in this flyby, you can see the Todd Boyce Defender from Battlestar Galactica again in the background, again having wormed its way in. We have another ship in the background here, which is kind of reminiscent of the short-range shuttlecraft from Battlestar Galactica, at least in its forward section. And this ship on the right also looks kind of like one of the civilian ships from BSG, but both a lot more heavily modified than anything else. I wonder if these are also salvaged 3D models. Again, here you can see the longbow with its gun turret rotated, which shows that it's not fixed or spinal. Very cool. Another great shot here as we see just a bunch of things in action at once. The ring ships here bouncing around, showing off their maneuvers and their forward weapons. A couple of good dorsal shots of the destroyers, again with the gun turrets rotated. All very clear and sharp and crisp VFX, just a gorgeous sequence all the way through. Looks like we can see kind of a salvo of missiles being fired here into what appears to be the largest Alliance battleship that we saw earlier. It's interesting to note that the Reavers pretty much win this battle, without a great deal of difficulty. We don't get a perfect look at the numerical difference here, but they did achieve total surprise, and it is pretty cool to see this organised military fleet on the Alliance's side being kind of overwhelmed by this barbaric swarming force. And towards the end here we get a shot of the Victoria corvette being rammed by some kind of massive Reaver ship. Seems very in character for the Reavers to be ramming stuff. Very unfortunate for a ship presumably quite manoeuvrable being a corvette to have been rammed. Perhaps that helm officer was not on his game today. And finally, just before we get to the end of this sequence, we get a little bit more footage of a couple of ramshackle Reaver ships chasing Serenity. Both fairly standard designs. The one that finally launches the harpoon at Serenity in the later scene is definitely given the most screen time and probably has the most care put into its design model. It's a pretty cool looking ship with the kind of external EMP beam that's used later, and that's mixed into this battle so you can kind of follow it all the way through in its pursuit of Serenity until it comes out later at the end. Finally, we have one last shot of the longbow destroyers and we can actually see the green and red running lights on either side. Really nice detail, really gorgeous ship. If anyone is capable of getting in contact with the 3D artist who is behind this, I'd love to see this thing on Sketchfab or something so I can analyze it in a bit more detail. It's very, very cool. And just a few more strike craft kicking around, a little bit more detail on the fighters and bombers. Get to see them in nice close formations around these ships. And from this point forward, it's mostly just Serenity and this one other Reaver ship. But overall, I just wanted to draw attention to this whole battle because I think it's really, really a gorgeous sequence filled with unique little designs that were only ever shown off once in the background of shots and deserve far more attention than they got. But at the same time, this sequence could only have been done the way it was. The whole idea of following Serenity as it's buried in this chaos is perfectly in keeping with this film's themes, with the kind of tone it's trying to push forward. And this definitely deserves a bit more appreciation as one of science fiction's more striking visual sequences. It's just an amazing battle sequence. And in a film, in a franchise that is never really about this kind of thing, they still took their time to assemble some thoughtful, sensible-looking fleets of ships that complement one another. There are franchises entirely about space warfare that don't do that successfully, and yet Serenity has done here. So really just an excellent job all in all. And I do appreciate that the Alliance was modernized with some more interesting designs here, more in keeping for a 2006 movie. While I wasn't completely against the massive Tohoku, I think, class ships from Firefly itself, the giant floating black and green city vessels that were used in that show, I definitely prefer the smaller, more grounded ships used in the movie. And if Firefly had continued multiple seasons, I would definitely have wanted to see that transition happen in the show as well. It just makes for a more grounded and kind of believable set of designs. But yeah, please do let me know in the comments below, what is your favourite ship introduced in this hodgepodge of interesting background designs? Is there anything else from the Firefly franchise, or any other battle with interesting background ships you'd like to see me track through and explore? I'd certainly like to do something like that. Either way, thank you all for watching. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. This video was kindly sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace is a website development tool that you can find online. It's an extremely easy to use system that's perfect for up-and-coming entrepreneurs, folks running small businesses online in need of things like web stores and blog pages, perfect for freelance graphic designers, voice actors, anybody else who needs to get their portfolio and their name out there with an online front page. It'll give you a far more professional outlook than something like a LinkedIn page or a social media account. It's extremely easy to set up, and you can get 10% off Squarespace if you use the code Spacedock and follow the link in the description below. You can get yourself your own domain and put together a nice, slick, modern-looking website without too much difficulty for whatever needs you might have. Thanks very much to Squarespace for kindly sponsoring this video. Please do check out their services in the link below. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. Thank you for watching Spacedock. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please do check out the links on the screen right now or in the description below for our Patreon and channel membership services. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving our team and our equipment and allowing us to put together bigger and more exciting video projects for you guys on the channel.